We are going to discuss the topic called as a ghost by Henrik Ibsen. Um, what we are going to discuss in this particular topic. The first one is a synopsis. Then second one is called as why the title ghost is given. And we'll also discuss about the playwright, right? Uh, Besides that, also we discuss the theme of ghost and some difficult vocabulary too, right? Um, Now, when we start discussing about the topic called as a ghost, we need to look at the characters in Ghost. So the story begins with what? Tomorrow is a big day, right? They are all convening on Rosenborg. Now, who is Rosenborg? A character in the story. So they all are convening. Convening means called as a gather on Rosenborg, the Albin estate, right? So to dedicate the Captain Albin Memorial Orphanage, right? So you would say that what they means referring to some of the people, right, who gather in a kind of a place, Rosenborg, right, which is known as the Albin estate. Albin estate means called as a big villa type. So and you would say that why they gather to dedicate the Captain Alving Memorial Orphanage, right? So Mrs. Alving, who is Mrs. Alving? She is the widow. She is the widow of whom? Captain Alving, right? Always remember the character. Also called Chamberlain Alving, right? So Mr. Chamberlain Alving's wife, Mrs. Alving. So as Mr. Chamberlain Alving died, right? So that's why Mrs. Alving is known as the widow. So Mr. Chamberlain Alving, who is he? A gentleman, widely respected in his society, in his community. So Mrs. Alving has kept his true behavior, right? So what is his true behavior? Mrs. Alving has kept his true behavior, alcoholism, right? So womanizing and illness. Now, if you talk about Mr. Alving, Chamberlain Alving, so what is his characteristic? What is his behavior? Now, he is an alcoholism, right? He is womanizing many women with whom he has the affair, and also illness, right? And these are the secret for 20 years who have kept Mrs. Alving. About whom? Her husband, right? So she sent her son, Oswald. Now you find out another character whose name is Oswald. So she sent her son, Oswald, away at age 7 to protect him from the polluting influence of his father. So why did Mrs. Alvin send her son, Oswald, to somewhere else? Because she did not want that her son would get into a kind of a polluting environment, right? So that polluting environment might influence her son, right? And this polluting environment of his father, right? Who also had an illegitimate daughter by a servant, right? So, if you talk about that, his father, so he was having an illegitimate daughter. Legitimate daughter means called as not legal daughter by a servant. And this daughter name is called as a Regine, 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 who was brought up by the carpenter, right? Whose name is called as Engstrand, and now works in Mrs. Alving's house, right? Now you find out that Regine was brought up by the who? The carpenter, another character, right? And what is the name of the carpenter? You can say that Engstrand, Engstrand. And now the daughter works in where? Mrs. Alving's house. Now, in that case, do you think that the daughter knows about her actual father? Might not. if she knew about it, how come she would work there, right or not? So let's say that Pastor Manders. So again, another character. Who is he? A minister in town, right? And not only the minister, he is also known as the executor, right? Executor of the Alvin estate, right? Executor of the Alvin estate means what? Concern about Alvin estate. Concern. What do you mean by concern? Means think about the Alvin estate. Why? Because he is an old friend of the family, right? So, in fact, Mrs. Alvin was in love with Mr. Pastor Mander, right? Do you get the point? So, Mrs. Alvin was in love with him and once fled to him from her husband, right? So, Pastor Manders had sent her home, right? So, obviously, why the woman left her actual husband and went to Pastor Manders? Because she had an affection. She had an affection towards whom? Towards Pastor Mander. And despite her husband to his presence, she went to Pastor Mander and decided to play with him, right? So, but Pastor Manders had sent her home, right? So, citing her duty as a wife and his need to protect his reputation. So, one side, Pastor Mander thought about his reputation, and another side, you can say that Pastor Mander pointed about, responsibility of the lady, Mrs. Alvin. So now he has more reason to scold his old flame, right? So as Mrs. Alvin has been reading radical books, right? So and openly agrees with her son's liberal ideas about sex, right? So she tells Pastor Manders the truth about her husband, but still wants to keep it hidden from Oswald, right? Now think of it, when she described her husband's quality before the Pastor Manders, but she did not tell to her son, biological son, right, whose name is called as Oswald, right? And Oswald has secrets of his own, right? Oswald is a son, so he has also his secret. So he is terminally ill with the same illness his father had, and knowing he will at some point become totally incapacitated, right? Has come home to die, hopefully with the help of Regine, right, whom he intends to marry. So Oswald intends to marry Regine. Just as Mrs. Alvin is about to let them know this can't happen. Why? Because both are brother and sister, right? So, but as Mrs. Alvin hide the truth before Oswald, that's the reason Oswald did not know about the actuality or originality. And that's why he desired or he showed the interest of getting married with whom? Regine, isn't it? So Oswald and Regine do not know they are brother and sister, right? So in that case, Regine also did not know that her father is Mr. Alvin, isn't it? So a fire burns down the orphanage, right? This is doubly problematic because Pastor Manders has insisted and Mrs. Alvin has agreed on going without insurance, right? So you can say that what Mrs. Alvin and Pastor Manders, so they don't have the insurance, right? So Pastor Manders is terrified of the scandal, but finds out an out in Engstrand, right? So you could say that what Pastor Manders is a kind of a person, right, who also involved in a kind of a scandal. Well, when you talk about scandal, what do you mean by scandal? Scam, isn't it? So, but finds an out in Engstrand, who promises to take the blame of the fire, right? So, who takes the blame for the fire? Engstrand, right? So, if Manders support is a proposed seller's home, right? So, which is actually a brothel. Brothel, you understand? So, a place where sex workers work, right? So, you can say that what? If Manders supports his proposed seller's home, actually a brothel, right? So, in that case, Engström promises to take the blame. What kind of a blame? The blame is called as the orphanage fired. Orphanage fired, right? Or not? So, but with the condition. The condition is what? If Manders, Pastor Manders, supports his proposed seller's home. So, if Manders supports or help the brothel, then he would take the blame. Isn't it? Am I clear with the picture? Now, finally, Mrs. Alvin tells Oswald what? The truth. Truth about what? Truth about her husband, right? And he had been miserably unhappy. Who had been miserably unhappy? So, Oswald, right? Why? So, he had sought pleasures of the flesh, right? And one of the consequences was Regini, right? So he had sought pleasure of flesh. What do you mean by sought pleasure of flesh? That's called as a wanted for the you can say that kind of sleeping with Regini. And one of the consequences was Regini, right? While Regini has been pursuing Oswald as a meal ticket, right? Once he finds out he is ill and is also her half brother, right? So she gives up. She gives up means she quits, right? Oswald and Mrs. Alvin are left alone, right? So, and Oswald makes his mother promise to euthanize him. What do you mean by euthanize? Now, for the goodness of the Oswald, right, means his mother should means allow him to die, euthanize, right? When the time comes. When the time comes, because we know that Oswald also suffered from the illness like his father, right? And he did not want his mother to suffer. And that's why he offered his mother that when she finds out any kind of a problem, so she could allow him to die, right? And Oswald makes his mother promise to euthanize him when the time comes. She agrees. Mother agrees, not realizing the time will come so soon, right? So as the play ends, the sun is rising. Oswald is slumped in a vegetative state. So Oswald is slumped, that's called as a numb or called as a kind of a paralysis type, in a vegetative state. And Mrs. Alvin stands with the morphine. Morphine is the drugs, trying to decide what to do, right? Because she promised him that she would uh, allow him to go for the euthanize, isn't it? So after that, uh, now this is what called as the story. I hope you understood this, right? Now let's discuss that. What's up with the title? What is up with the title? So Ibsen doesn't leave us guessing about what the title ghost means, right? So Ibsen doesn't leave us guessing about what the title ghost means. It means there are some important moments, right, in the play when ghosts are mentioned, right? So when Regini and Oswald are overheard making out, right? So making out means comfortable, right? So in Mrs. Alvin's long speech to Manders about ghosts are dead ideas, right? When Mrs. Alvin effectively ends her communication with the Pastor Manders, right? And when Oswald tells his mother to give up the idea of other child affection, right? As he hunted, uh, so troubled, you can say that troubled protagonist. So troubled protagonist means what? The main character, right? So Mrs. Alvin is always the first to produce the word ghost, right? These references help to show us how Mrs. Alvin's thought about the past changes throughout the play, right? So Mrs. Alvin's long speech on ghost, right, says the most about what Ibsen means, right? Mrs. Alvin muses. Muses means called as in a silent situation. Uh, so I some and in a very slow voice, she said, "I sometimes think we are all ghosts." Right. So Pastor Manders, and whom did she say? She said to Pastor Manders. It is not only what we have inherited from our parents that hunts us, right? So it is all the old obsolete ideas. What do you mean by obsolete? The meaning of obsolete is called as ideas which are no use, right? So it's all the old ideas which are no use, right? So all kinds of old obsolete beliefs, the beliefs which are also no use, old beliefs, right? They are not alive in us. So the ideas, the beliefs that are not present with us, right? But even so, we can't check free of them, right? So it means the thing is that we don't carry the ideas and beliefs of the old or the past, right? We don't have, but we can't leave it also. We don't have, we don't use it in a practical field, but we cannot leave it also, isn't it? Let's say that an example of it. You are in a modern day, right? You want to wear fashionable items, Western clothes, right? And have an affair with a boy or a girl, right? And live a free life, but you can't live. Why? Because your parents are there, isn't it? You don't want to carry the old ideas because you believe that your parents have the old school thought, right? And you live in a modern age. So, but you can't also leave your parents, isn't it? So that's what it is stated. While Mrs. Alving first considers Captain Alving the ghostly burden she wants to get rid of. Now, the first ghost is who? Mr. Mr. Chamberlain Alving. Captain Chamberlain Alving. So why he is called as a ghost? Because means he had all kind of bad habits, right? And he became the burden to Mrs. Alving, right? And that's the reason Mrs. Alving wanted to get rid of. Get rid of means free from him. So she begins to see that her own social restraints and obligations are hunting her too. But she can't leave, right? Why? Now, because she lives in a kind of a society. She has the kind of a obligation, duties, right? Now, did you remember that when she left her home and decided to play with Pastor Manders, but she could not, right? So shedding then becomes her action in the play, isn't it? Now, so that's what you would find out the idea about the topic. Yeah, it's a very sad. Why you are so sad? You shall not. What did you say? Okay. Let's discuss about Henrik Ibsen. So, if you talk about Henrik Ibsen, the writer, who was born on March 2018-28, right? So, and where did he born? In Skien, Skien, Skien. If you want, you can note down. And Skien Norway, right? So he grew up in small Norway coastal town as the oldest of five children, born in or born to Brooke and Henrik Ibsen. So now you can say that the two wives, right? One is called as a Nerd, KNUD, and another one is called as a Henrik Ibsen. So Henrik Ibsen's father was a successful merchant. Merchant means you understand businessman, right? And his mother is a painter. His mother painted, played the piano, and loved to what? Go to the theater. So Ibsen himself also expressed an interest in becoming an artist as well, right? So the family was thrown into poverty, right? When Ibsen was eight years old, because of problems with his father's business, right? So nearly all traces of their previous money, wealth, affluence, right, had to be sold out to cover debts, right? Cover debts means what? His father took money, right? Took money from others and to pay back them. So they had to sell everything that they had means bought, right? So and the family moved to a rundown farm near town. Rundown farm near town. So in a town nearby the town, so they found out a place where they settled. There, Ibsen spent much of his time on what? Reading, painting, and performing magic tricks. Right. So at 15, Ibsen stopped school and went to work, landing a position as an apprentice in a, you can say, pharmacy in Grimstad. So he works in a pharmacy, right? So he worked there for 6 years, using his limited free time to write what? Poetry and paint. So while there, so he fathered a son with a maid, right? So he fathered a son with a maid. So it means he had an affair and he became the father of a son with with a maid, right? So though he provided the boy with some financial support, Ibsen never met that boy who is his actual son, right? So in 1849, he wrote his first play. Who? Ibsen. What is that play? Catilina, right? Catilina, Catilina. So, which is written in a verse, right? Modeled after one of his great influences. And whom did he get influenced by? So, he got influenced by then William Shakespeare, right? So, in the following year, Ibsen had a fateful encounter with a violinist and theatre manager. Fateful encounter means what? Fortunate, you can say, right? He met the violinist and the theatre manager, and whose name is called as a Old Bull. Old Bull, right? So Ole, O-L-E, Ole Bull, B-U-L-L. So Bull liked Ibsen and offered him a job as a writer and manager for the Norwegian theatre, right? In Bergen. Bergen is the name of the place. Not like many other writers and poets, Ibsen had a long and seemingly happy marriage to Susanne Dye Thorsen, right? So that now you find out another woman came into his life. The couple, Ibsen and Thorsen, waited in the year of 1858 and welcomed their only child, whose name is called Sigurd, right? Or Sigurd, S-I-G-U-R-D. The following year, Ibsen left Norway in 1862 and finally settling in Italy for a time, right? So there in 1865, he wrote the name of another novel called Brand, B-R-A-N-D, a five-act tragedy about a clergyman. So this story is about who? Now, about a clergyman. Clergyman, you understand? Father of the church, whose faithlessly devotion to his faith cost him his family and ultimately his life. Right. The play made him famous in Scandinavia. Right. So the play, which is which he performed or which he wrote, means so that got famous. He then wrote his most famous work, and the name of that work is called as A Doll's House. Right? A Doll's House. Right? So in this 1879 play set tongues are wagging throughout Europe for its exploration of the lead character's struggle with the traditional roles of wife and mother and her own need of self-determination. And in the year of 1881, he wrote the novel called Ghost, right? So, which moved up even more controversial. So, people found out then something unusual and they protest, right? By tackling such topic as incest and vulnerable disease. So, the topic is nothing but providing some kind of a disease, right? Infected disease, right? The outcry was so strong. The outcry means the outside people. The topic is ghost. So the outcry was so strong that the play was not performed widely, not till 2 years later. Right. So Ibsen's next work is called as An Enemy of the People. Right. So that showed one man in conflict with his community. Right. So some critics say it was Ibsen's response to the backlash he received for Ghost. Right. So it means he got a kind of a bad feedback for Ghost, and that's why he wrote another one. And it was something like a one man in the community. Right. So in 1891, Ibsen returned to Norway as a literary hero because he became popular of writing. So he may have left as a frustrated artist, but he came back as an internationally known playwright. Right. For much of his life, Ibsen had lived an almost reclusive existence. What do you mean by reclusive existence? That's called as a lonely existence, isolated life. So, but he seemed to fight in the spotlight in his latter years, becoming a tourist attraction, right, of sorts in Christiania, right? Christiania is the name of the place. He also enjoyed what the events held in his honor. His honor means he got popular, right? People start honoring him, right? In his honor in 1898, to mark his 17th birthday, right? He continued to write plays with a more self-reflective quality, with full of focus, including The Master Builder, another writing, and When We Dead Awakening, another play, is a final play, you can say. Right. So in 1900, Ibsen had a series of strokes, heart attack, right, that left him unable to write. And he managed to live for several more years, but he was not fully, present during much of this time. So Ibsen died on what? May 23, 1906. When did he die? 23, 1906, May month. Right? So his last words were what? To the contrary. To the contrary. So in Norway. So considered a literary titan at the time of his passing, he received a state funeral from the state funeral. You understand state honor, right? So from the Norway government. So while Ibsen may be gone, he left the world. His work continues to be performed around the world, isn't it? Pure Kant, A Doll's House, and Hedda Gabler are his most widely produced plays today. So actresses such as you can say Anderson, Blanchett have taken on Ibsen's Nora and Hedda Gabler character, which are considered to be two of the most demanding theatrical roles. Right. So it means some of the characters get famous also because of him. Right. So in addition to his plays, Ibsen also wrote around 300 poems. Right. Today, Ibsen is the world's most produced playwright, excepting only his idol, William Shakespeare. Isn't it? So, because he is the admirer of whom? Then so William Shakespeare. Right. Now, if you talk about the themes that he presents in Ghost, is what? Now, 3 to 4 themes are there. The first theme is called as freedom and confinement. What do you mean by freedom and confinement? Freedom is called as the liberty, and confinement is called as a sick. You have been placed yourself in a isolated situation, right? So the characters in Ghost are trapped. Trapped, do you understand? Trapped because of the situation. Yeah. So they are trapped in the situation, social duties, right? Obligation, your class restriction, social duties, class restriction, religion, and family responsibility. Have them all in a vice grip. Vice grip means what? Supportedly hold. The main character, Mrs. Alvin, is trapped by her own hangs up, right? Or own hang-ups, you can say. It means she is trapped by her own promise, right? She is, trapped in her own duties and own social obligations and family responsibility. Isn't it? We all are trapped. So, like a good Victorian housewife, so we know that it is the kind of play that indicates to the Victorian age, right? So, it is stated that, like a good Victorian housewife, she believes that she should keep quiet about her unconventional ideas. Unconventional means what? That called as something that you can't express, right? So protect her bad husband's good reputation, bad husband's good reputation, right? And above all, she is a good mother, right? So Mrs. Alvin's erring son means what? Son who is in suffering from disease. So wipes out these shores with his belief in the idea of lips clay. Choosing your personal path of joy. Don't worry about being a good mom, he says. Who says? Oswald says to his mother that what? Don't worry, choose your means own path to live a personal path to joy, right? So in fact, stop being a mom entirely, right? So in the end, he asked her to put him out of his misery. So how did? He said that euthanize, right? So this is called as a freedom and confinement. Second is called as a duty, right? When we talk about duty, duty is a word repeated over and over in Ghost, the play. Everyone has a duty related to the role they play in the society. The wife or mother is duty bound to protect her husband's reputation, no matter how unsavory he is, how bad he is, who her husband is, right? And to sacrifice everything for her son, duty, right? In return, the son must love his mother. So, what does a mother want? That love from her son or daughter. So, what does a wife want? Her husband's uh, means huge love, right? So, you find out that the maid is duty bound to clean up everyone's mess, no matter how colossal it is. So, you also find out the maid who is the sister of Oswald. So, she is also dutiful. Duty, not beauty. Dutiful. How? Now, because see, her job is what? The job of the maid is to clean everyone's mess. Everyone's mess means everyone's bad thing, right? So, and she has also, no matter how colossal, how big that mess is. The pastor is father of the church, is duty bound to control everyone else's fulfillment of their duty, to make others aware that what is your duty, what you're supposed to do. No wonder these people seem so dull, right? So all this responsibility is exhausting or tiredful and keeps them from being themselves, isn't it? Keep themselves what? Away from their freedom, right? So that's called as the duty. Then third one is called as the memory and the past. We can tell from the title of Ghost that the past plays a role there, isn't it? Memory and the past. So past plays a role here. The spooky, creaky Alvin's house. Spooky, creaky Alvin's house. It means called as the noise and the kind of awkward appearance of the house is collapsing under the weight of the past. Collapsing, it means burst out because of the past. Why? Past is what? Past is that. Means Rajini is the daughter of her husband, right? Sorry, from the other mother, right? And Oswald, who start loving to Rajini, did not know the fact, right? So that's what is the past. There is a memory of misbehaving father, right? There is a memory of what means that you can say she lived with, right? Ill father, sexualizing father, right? Compounded by Mrs. Alvin's memory of every lie she had to tell to keep his real life a secret. So it means you have the secret, and for hiding that secret, you tell lie, isn't it? So Mrs. Alving wants to bury the past. Bury the past means you can't bury the past. Past is always, or the fact is fact, whether it is in past or it is in present, or right. But it is a fact. It cannot be buried. Yes, you can forget it, but you cannot bury it. But when her son returns with the past afflicting his body, her mission changes. Instead of a final burial of her husband, Mrs. Alving, facilitates an enormous or huge recovery of the memory of his life. Right. So her new understanding of her husband's life-loving nature and her role in what? Having stuffed it, repressed it, changed her understanding of herself. Right. Then you find out the fourth one, that's called as a guilt and blame. Guilt and blame. So Ibsen saw guilt. Henrik Ibsen, the author, saw guilt and saying, as a Protestant, Catholic and Protestant, two different church. So Protestant control mechanisms and spent much of his life criticizing them. He examined these two emotions almost, you can say, obsessively, right, in his literary work, and wasn't a fan of these two carries of unhappiness. In the writing called Ghost, guilt and shame are nasty byproducts. Nasty means bad byproducts of a world governed by shoulds. You should stick with your husband. You should love your mother, and so forth. Isn't it? So you can say that what? If you don't do, then it makes you feel guilt. It makes you feel shame. Get rid of this garbage. Ibsen says he is advocating an authentic response to the world. Authentic means original response to the world. One motivated by the heart, not by feelings of guilt. You should do what your heart wants, not that what other people feel. Right? So, in that case, this is the whole four things that you need to keep in your mind. Now, if you talk about Henrik Ibsen's writing, so that points out the style or genre, right? So, you can say that Ghost is a melodrama. Now, what is melodrama? Now, melodrama is the theatrical form Ibsen used to express his ideas, right? So melodrama became very popular in Europe, right, during 19th century. So the Victorian stage, like I pointed, no good Victorian wife, right? So the Victorian stage melodrama featured 6 stock characters, right? The hero, the villain, the heroine, aged parents, right? A sidekick and a servant of the aged parent, engaged in a sensational plot that featured theme of love and murder, right? Often the good, but not very clever hero, right? So who is duped by a scheming villain, right? The hero is not that clever. He is duped, cheated by villain, right? Who has eyes on the damsel in distress until the luck interferes at the end to make sure the victory of good over evil. Right? Ibsen goes far beyond Henrik Ibsen goes far beyond the traditional signpost of melodrama, right? So think stock characters, contrived, contrived plots. It's called as a very much you can say that uh, uh, contrasting one, social contrast, right? And full of suspense. In fact, he is indebted to the form for much of the way he uses language, the kind of a language which he uses, isn't it? So that's what you would find out from the topic called ghost. So what did we discuss here? We discuss about the style and genre. We talk about theme, right? So theme of the plot, right? And we also talk about the characters and we discuss the main ideas, how these ideas are presented in the theater, right? So, and about Henrik Ibsen and his contribution and his biographical sketch, isn't it? So that's what is all about the ghost. And we also understood why the title ghost is uh, appropriate. Am I clear with this? Understood? That's all for the day. Thank you. We'll meet in the next class. Till then, bye bye.